The ballroom glittered, a sea of laughter and shimmering gold from the grand chandeliers that threw light across the marble floors. But in one corner, a little girl stood, her small frame dwarfed by a massive piano. Her hands trembled just above the polished keys. Her clothes were plain, her shoes scuffed, but her eyes held a quiet determination that seemed to cut through the opulence surrounding her. The laughter of the wealthy guests felt like cruel, ringing bells in her ears. Then, the host's voice, loud and full of careless power, boomed across the room. He was a millionaire, tall and confident in his tailored suit. "Play something for us, little one," he declared with a mocking smile. "If you can truly impress me, I'll adopt you." A wave of chuckles spread through the crowd, treating his words as a clever joke. But to the little girl, those words were not a game. They were the only door she had ever seen to a life she had been praying for. Her name was Anna, only 7 years old, but her small shoulders carried the weight of a lifetime of hardship. Abandoned as a toddler, she had been shuffled from one foster home to another, where the ache of hunger and the sting of being ignored were her only constant companions. The piano had become her secret escape. She had discovered it in a dusty corner of an old orphanage, a place where broken toys and forgotten furniture were left to gather dust. Her fingers, as if by instinct, had found their way to the keys. She had pressed them, one by one, until a sound, imperfect but beautiful, filled the lonely emptiness around her. From that moment, music became her true language. It was how she cried, how she hoped, and how she spoke of feelings too big for her small words. Now, here she was, standing before a room full of men and women who looked at her as if she were little more than a spectacle. Her heart pounded against her ribs, and she wondered if she even deserved to sit at the piano in this glittering room. The millionaire who had spoken those words, his name was Alexander Gray, was known for his arrogance as much as he was for his immense wealth. He wore his success like a suit of armor, always amused by the desperation of those beneath him. He had only meant to tease her, to entertain his guests with a show of cruelty that he disguised as humor. But Anna didn't see it that way. For her, it was a chance. As her small hands hovered above the keys, she remembered the countless nights she had spent practicing with nothing but the pale light of the moon to guide her. She remembered how the nuns at the orphanage would sometimes hush her because she played too late into the night. But she couldn't stop. Music was the only thing that made her feel alive. And now, with everyone watching, her soul demanded to be heard. At first her fingers stumbled. A wrong note echoed in the grand hall, and someone in the crowd laughed. Alexander leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smirk spreading across his face. But then, something shifted. Anna closed her eyes, shutting out the glittering chandeliers, the judgmental eyes, and the cruel chuckles. She imagined herself back at the orphanage, alone with her piano, and she let her heart lead her. The melody that flowed was not from sheet music or from any formal training. It was raw, unfiltered emotion, a song that told a story of loneliness, of longing, and of a fragile hope that refused to die. The room began to quiet. The laughter faded, replaced by a deep hush that spread like a ripple across the crowd. One by one, even the most skeptical guests fell silent as Anna's music wove its spell. Her small body swayed with the notes, her eyes still closed, and the sound that filled the room was unlike anything they had ever heard. It wasn't perfect. There were tiny mistakes, uneven rhythms, but the purity of her heart poured through every key she touched. Alexander's smirk faltered. He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the little girl who had dared to turn his mocking challenge into something extraordinary. For the first time in years, he felt something stir deep inside him, something he thought he had buried long ago under layers of wealth, power, and pride. Memories of his own childhood came rushing back, a time when his mother had played the piano for him just before she passed away. He had locked those memories away, convincing himself that vulnerability was a weakness. But Anna's simple, honest music was breaking through the thick walls he had built around his heart. When the final note lingered in the air, the silence in the room was overwhelming. No one clapped. No one dared to speak. All eyes were on the little girl who had just turned a cruel game into a moment of profound truth. She opened her eyes slowly, as if waking from a dream, and looked directly at Alexander. For a moment, she wasn't a scared orphan. She was a brave soul demanding to be seen. Alexander's throat tightened. He wanted to laugh again, to dismiss what had just happened and regain control of the room. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he found himself rising to his feet, his eyes burning with emotions he couldn't control. The room suddenly erupted into applause, a thunderous sound, but Alexander barely heard it. All he could see was Anna standing there, her hand still resting on the piano, waiting for an answer. The crowd expected him to continue the joke, to toss out another witty line and entertain them. But Alexander was no longer in the mood for laughter. In that moment, he realized with painful clarity how empty his life had become. He had money, power, and influence, but he had no family, no warmth, nothing real to hold on to. And here was this little girl who had just reminded him of the beauty of love, of pain, of hope. Anna didn't know if he meant what he had said before, but she held on to it with all her might. For her, adoption meant safety, love, and belonging, everything she had never truly had. She stood there, vulnerable and waiting. Alexander walked toward her, each step heavy with the weight of his pride crumbling. When he finally reached her, he knelt down so his eyes were level with hers. In a voice that was unsteady but deeply sincere, he whispered, "You've given me something no amount of money could ever buy. From this day forward, you're not alone anymore." Tears welled in Anna's eyes, and for the first time in her young life, she allowed herself to believe. The applause grew louder as the guests realized they had just witnessed something unforgettable. But for Anna and Alexander, the world had shrunk to just the two of them. He wrapped his arms around her gently, and she clung to him, as if afraid he might disappear. Their new life was not a simple fairy tale. It required time, patience, and commitment. Alexander faced questions from friends and ridicule from those who thought he had gone soft, but he didn't care. For the first time in his life, he had a purpose beyond just making more money. Anna, too, had to adjust. She carried scars from her past, fears that didn't vanish overnight. But slowly, with Alexander's unwavering support, she began to heal. The piano remained her sanctuary, but now it was no longer a lonely one. She played for him, and sometimes he would sit beside her, awkwardly pressing keys until they both burst into laughter. Months turned into years, and the bond between them grew unbreakable. Alexander discovered that true wealth was not measured by numbers in a bank account, but by the love you give and the lives you touch. Anna discovered that even the most broken hearts can find a family in the most unexpected places. Together, they built a new story, one of hope, redemption, and the beautiful music that would echo through their lives forever.